We've been overdue for a mailbag here on the call up. So we've got 10 awesome questions from you. Thank you so much for asking. Of course, I'm Aram. He's Jack. First episode of the week here. And we have the Peyton Neals conversation coming up later this week. We adjusted that scheduling there, which actually works out nicely because right around that time, we were thinking about, okay, what do we plug in for the first episode of this week? And we're like, wait, we haven't done a mailbag in a while. And sure enough, listeners, followers came up clutch. We say it every time and naturally occurring probably because you'd like to think the audience grows over time, but it's just really eye-opening how many questions come in. This has to be the most questions we've ever gotten for a call-up mailbag, and I can't thank you all enough. I wish we could answer all of them. We'd on our pacing, we'd be here for 18 hours, but
Right.
we will make sure to continue to rotate and get to as many different questions each mailbag and do more of them moving forward. But it's just always so cool to see all the questions come in, and we had a lot of great ones to choose from.
Yeah, dude. I think we have 10, but it was awesome because we posted it at like 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And it was an immediate thing where it was like everybody popped in and they want to know. I love this. Like, I sound so corny right now, but I love this community because there are genuinely just so many questions that like very few people can answer and I can't answer. And like I know some of them you can't answer, but
Yep.
that's the beauty of prospects. Like there are so many guys that so many people are banking on, and the essence of all of this is promise. And it just feels like there's a little bit more optimism in all the questions when we do a mailbag on the call up as opposed to a big league mailbag. Why does this
Why
guy suck?
why isn't my team signing anybody?
Right.
Who could my team finally trade for? Which I love all that stuff too, but yeah, it's a lot more open-ended here. But at the same time, there's a lot more specific questions too, I think, and it just shows us kind of where everybody's mind's at. The one thing I do love though is like certain fans of like certain teams, just asking super nitty-gritty specific questions as to like, prospects that nobody else would know in their org. And I'm like, I want to answer that, but there's no way that that's going to be enjoyed by the masses
It's
here.
not good
Like
radio. Yeah.
your complex prospect for the Tigers, like I'm sorry, I don't know if the fans of the other 29 teams are going to love that, but that's also what the live Q&As are for when we do those on YouTube. And keep an eye out like on social. We're going to continue to do those live Q&As. I will absolutely answer your questions on, you know, whoever at the complex on there. But generally speaking, not as great for the for the mailbag situation because we got a lot of other fan bases, and at least you want to have an idea of who that player is. And like, obviously you'll see on question number one, we're not always just going to go with the biggest names possible,
Right.
but yeah, I think one of my favorite Marlins, one of my favorite Marlins accounts that I interact with like plenty on social, like it was like, it was too complex or two lower level pitchers. And I'm like, there's no way 85% of our audience knows who those people are. And like, and that's not a slight on our audience. Like I
No.
barely knew. I think very much on. I think one of the two names.
Yeah, like sick Kiner Benitez shout there. I
Yeah,
thought that
kind
was awesome.
yeah, and Dishmay, and you had Dishmay as well. But I will talk about that a little bit later because I think that we did get actually a Marlins themed question, but
Yeah.
we got 10 of them, so we might as well hop right into it.
We've got 10. I will say before we get into the first one that we plucked, there were a lot of January 15 questions. There were a lot of international free agency questions there, and we wanted to stay away from the international free agency questions. Sasaki is a bit easier to answer than I think the 16-year-olds that are going to be signing here at the end of the week. And, we'll do our all name team here on IFA, but it's, and you can speak much better to this than I can. It's really hard to get any information on these guys before they sign, except for the price tag. And that, I mean, like, dude, you see a lot of these guys populate into top 30 prospect lists on Pipeline. It's usually just because of the price tag, and that's about it.
Yeah, and then there's a couple folks that do an awesome job out there, and like yeah, Ben Badler, like that's just out there legitimately crushing it for Baseball America. And like if I was out there seeing these kids, day in and day out, I'd absolutely be comfortable talking about it. But if all of my information is going to mostly come from limited clips and conversations with scouts, like we'll talk about it as we get a little bit more of an idea on the class and just like who are the perceived top guys overall. But in terms of giving like my personal opinion, I just don't feel comfortable doing that because I feel like I'd be forcing a takeaway from very limited information, and I don't want to mislead or totally. I would say probably I could flip it and be feeling totally different after 20 games of a pro sample. So, especially with how early it is in these kids' development, like we'll talk about who is being discussed by, scouts and by the industry as, the buzziest names and the biggest gets, the best gets, so to speak, that evaluators are most excited about. But in terms of giving like any takeaway or personal rankings or anything like that, I feel like it would not be the best product from us
Right.
if I was doing that. So I am very excited to rank those prospects and write
Yeah.
about them and break them down. But until we have some like legitimate video and a little bit of data, I need at least like 20 ABs to work with before I can even just give a surface level takeaway on these
Fair.
guys.
Fair. I will say I know who a top 10 prospect in the Cardinal system is now because the Cardinals apparently inked Pedro Strope's kid for
Oh,
$1.5 million.
stop it. It's Pedro
Yeah.
Strope's kid?
Yeah, that's crazy. I saw that and I was like, there's no chance. There are some things that make me feel old, I guess.
And
Like,
like we're young. I know, like I always say our audience are so many listeners are like, I don't want to hear it. You
right.
guys
I
aren't
get
even 30 yet. But like there's certain players where it's like, damn.
Yeah, like Pedro Strope's kid, really? Like, honestly, the first person that made me feel like that was Marvin Harrison Jr. I was like, no way.
Yeah.
But now it's like Pedro Strope was like a 2016 Cub, and now his kid is in pro ball.
Yeah, that is nuts. Um so by the way, we'll start with the restart question too, right? Between Kiner Benitez and Eliezer Dismay. No, I'm actually just because we're joking about that from Restart. I'm gonna that I
You gotta
love that
answer it.
account though. Uh, I'll answer it at the end. But yeah, there's a couple recently that have like have been jarring. And especially on the high school like top prospect circuit too, that are getting pretty concerning. I'm like, holy crap, time flies. But Bryce Eldridge is also a great starting point here. And another guy that his birthday also kind of shakes me a little bit too sometimes when I see the year.
Is he an '04 kid? Or no, he might be an '05 kid.
I think he's an '05 kid.
That's crazy. But question one comes from one of our new writers, actually, at justbaseball.com. And Michael Monreal has done a great job here. M. Monreal 0423 on X. What is Bryce Eldridge's floor slash ceiling? Is he a future MVP slash superstar caliber guy, couple time all star guy, or just your average power hitter? It's an interesting one because I feel like the difference between his floor and ceiling is as drastic as anybody in the top 50.
No doubt, no doubt, and that's why I love the question. Like, and I think these questions are important, like because I think it's so easy to get carried away in the excitement that we get far away from what actually would be a good outcome for this player, right? Because we start dreaming on the ceiling. Of course, a player like Bryce Eldridge is almost one of those classic, like you can be whatever you want to be, right? Like he's 6'7", he has a great approach already, and we've seen flashes of a pretty advanced swing for his archetype, right? A teenager who is as big and long, and that was a two-way guy. Like it's pretty impressive how advanced he is as a hitter. But at the same time, there's just natural limitations that are going to come with that profile, right? Like how many 6'7" hitters are not going to have whiff issues? And he's 6'7" and 19 years old, 20 years old. Like he's going to probably continue to fill out. He may lose even a little bit more of that fluidity. Who knows? We'll see. I think there's a focus on maintaining that for sure. Even now that he's not pitching, I don't think he's going to be, in the gym trying to bulk up chest and make himself immobile. Like I think there's clearly a focus on maintaining agility and fluidity, and that's a big reason why he's, effective. But there's definitely swing and miss there, and there's going to be swing and miss there. I think that's just the reality of it. So for a guy like that, I do think it's the easiest answer is going to be the middle one, but I
Mhm.
genuinely do think that that's probably the outcome is a guy that in his strongest years hits a ton of home runs to where he's making all-star games off of, 35 plus home runs. And the
Yep.
big wrinkle is going to be walking, right? Where we saw him extremely patient in low A, and then as he got to high A and double, still put up great numbers, but you saw him start to expand a little bit more, totally natural. Saw the same thing in the Arizona Fall League. I think it just longer swing, you get a little bit sped up, and you start expanding a little bit more, cheating a little bit more. I think for his archetype, he still is quite patient, and I think that's going to shine through. But that's like the Santander thing, right? Where it puts so much pressure on your ability to slug if you're not walking. And that really can be the difference between making a lot of all-star games
Yeah.
and making just a couple, because we saw it with Santander, and the same reason why I still think he's unsigned. Like, that guy had to hit 40 plus home runs to get that OPS over 800. You don't want that to happen with Eldridge, especially when he's going to be calling San Francisco home, where
Right.
it's very hard to hit 40 out there. So I think the safest answer is multi all-star, but I think that he can really elevate that floor with the approach. It's a big strike zone, so it's going to be hard to consistently draw walks. But you have to also remember, pitchers are going to be scared to throw to this guy. Like, he's a force of nature when you think about how he can run into baseballs, and it's all field. So I think it's going to be a consistent power hitter. And then how much he can walk and just how much swing and miss ends up creeping into his game, I think will be the deciding factor whether between perennial all-star and a guy that makes a couple all-star games in the years that everything's on time, and he has that
Yeah.
Anthony Santander type of year.
I'm not trying to compare these two because I think there is a better comp in minor league baseball to Austin Riley than Bryce Eldridge, but I want to compare the progression to Austin Riley because I'm sure you remember in 2019, 2020, the first version of Riley that we saw at the major league level. And it was a guy that showed a lot of promise, but also had some clear cut deficiencies. His first 80 games of Major League Baseball, he hit 18 homers in 80 games. That was crazy, but he also had an 85 WRC plus because he didn't walk
Yeah.
and he K'd 36% of the time.
Yeah.
So he didn't have the baby giraffe thing that we talk about with Eldridge sometimes, but that was a guy that showed you promise in 18 swings, but also had a bunch of swings that didn't look MLB ready.
Yeah.
And then he comes back in that COVID shortened 20 and it looks a little better, but he's not there yet. And then in 21, you actually see Austin Riley because he
Yeah.
gets a little bit more comfortable. Walk rate jumps from 5.5 to about 8.5%. The K rate is down to 25%, which is where it's sat. A lot of his WAR value comes from getting better defensively at first base,
For sure.
or at third base, pardon. And Eldridge is going to be a first baseman, but offensively, I could see that happen where you see a guy that has some clear cut deficiencies, but a shit ton of promise in Eldridge for the first 2, 3 years. And then it clicks in year 3, year 4. And you're okay with that because he's 19 years old, 20 years old.
It's a great point, because I think he is going to be one of those guys that, I mean, we saw it. And I think that what really led to the hype train taking off on another level was the fact that he's getting aggressively pushed, right? And no problem with high A. And then in a short stint, putting up big numbers in double A, and then handling triple A. And people are like, whoa, like, he's getting fast tracked and he's handling it all, which he absolutely was. But he was dismantling fastballs, wasn't missing heaters, and then, recognizing spin well enough to be able to manage those ABs, and just not missing heaters, not missing hangers. As a young guy at that level, at those levels that was being challenged, he rose to the occasion there. But those are the guys that I think the first real legitimate test for them usually comes at the big league level. And then when they struggle, it's like, oh, quadruple A got. No, it's not that. It's that he is so good at a certain subset of things that he is able to just be productive through the minor leagues. And then at the major leagues, you're just going to see things that you just never were going to be challenged with to that degree. And we even saw it like with Eldridge at the upper levels. Again, he was able to manage it because he was extremely productive. But if you look at the in zone whiff rates on the secondaries, like it's pretty high. Am I sounding the alarms for him? Of course not. But when your in zone whiff rates are that high, it shows that, okay, there's a little bit of like rigidness to the swing. He needs to work on the adjustability and being able to just maintain his path against secondary stuff, typical stuff. But it's not as much of a problem in double A because you swing and miss through a good changeup. The odds that that guy's going to locate that changeup again are kind of slim compared to what it is in the big leagues, where in the big leagues, oh, wow, they see that swing you just took at a changeup, they're going to give you another one. Or they're going to give you something else that works well off of that. Whereas I think in double A, Eldridge, tough swing on a changeup or tough swing on a hard slider, both those pitches ate him up pretty good at points at the end of the year. Well, I'm just going to be ready for a heater, and when the second I get it, I ain't missing it. And he wasn't, and he isn't. Or, oh, they left it up a little bit, seats. And you can make a good career off of that. But again, the guys that our mistake hitters and fastball hitters are a couple time All-Stars in the right year,
Yeah.
not the MVP candidate and thing like that. I'm not saying Eldridge is capped there, but that's kind of what we have to see take the next step. And I think just for a power guy like that, I don't know if there's enough like pureness to the hit tool to
Mhm.
be that MVP candidate, which is fine. I think he's going to be a multi All-Star.
Yeah, and a flawless mistake hitter. Like when I think about the best mistake hitter that I've ever watched, it was Ryan Howard when I was young,
Yeah.
and Ryan Howard won an MVP based on being a mistake hitter. But think about how long that lasted. Like there were a lot of people that wish that Ryan Howard was really good for a way longer time than he actually was. I think
Yeah.
he had a 3 year stretch, and then the pitching got better, and the pitching started working around his deficiencies, and all of a sudden the fall from grace for Ryan Howard was not very graceful.
Yeah, they blame the Achilles for that. I'm sure it didn't help, but it was a long swing that as velos started to get more significant on average, and then secondaries worked better off of that, it created a very difficult spot for Howard where he had to cheat to make it happen. I think
Yeah.
Eldridge, in terms of the compactness of his swing for how big he is, like he's ahead of his years for sure, and he's got that. I think down, but also
Yeah.
pitching is exponentially more difficult now than it really ever was from a velocity standpoint. And like the velo and the velo separation is the biggest challenge for these 6'7" guys. So, I think the swing and miss is going to be highlighted a little bit more. And I love that you mentioned like the transition into pro ball. It may be a bit of a learning curve for him. Like we talked about, like he shouldn't be breaking camp this year because I think it might take a year or two. I think he should get up this year, but to
Yeah.
force him there would be a little bit much. I want him to see AAA arms, even in a hitter friendly environment, that are executing, doubling up and tripling up and see how he handles that. But
Yeah.
like it, guys like with this much power and the swing and miss concerns, it really ends up coming down to how consistently can you barrel up and adjust to secondary stuff. And we've seen guys like Aaron Judge be able to figure it out and do that. But it is really hard to once you are that type of hitter. So I think it's going to be power over everything. The walks can really elevate the floor, but I do think he's going to be better than your average power hitter for sure, just especially for where he is at his age already.
Now, real quick follow up to wrap this question. Is Bryce Eldridge one of the 9 best hitters calling Sutter Health Ballpark home this year? So you've got the Sacramento A's calling Sacramento home, and then you have Bryce Eldridge playing there in the weeks that the A's are on the road.
Define best hitter, like currently as constructed
So
at
like
this exact moment.
Brent Rooker is going to be the best hitter calling Sutter Health Ballpark home in 2025. I think Lawrence Butler is 2. And then I think it could be Jacob Wilson or Langoliers 3. You know what I mean? Like I've got guys like that. I do think that we can't get to 9 before mentioning Bryce Eldridge.
You got so yeah, if Butler, you have Jacob Wilson, what is the antithesis of
Yeah.
Eldridge, but
Rooker, Butler, Wilson, Langoliers. I would probably put Soderstrom ahead of
I,
Eldridge.
it's very close, very very cool. But at this present moment, if you gave
Yeah.
them 100 games at the big league level, I'm going to take Soderstrom right now. Um,
Geloff, I would probably
no,
take
I would
Eldridge.
actually I would take Eldridge's numbers right now.
And then like Seth Brown, I would take
No,
Eldridge over Seth
yep.
Brown. Like I do think he's the 6th or 7th best hitter calling that ballpark in Sacramento home.
There's so many layers to why that's absurd. But it's just absurd that actually a pretty good A's team is calling that place home. But also, I think that is a testament to Eldridge. Like I legitimately would, even with the growing pains, take Eldridge for 100 games at the big league level over like a Zach Geloff offensively going into next year, no doubt about it.
Wow. Okay, next one is a pitching question. And I thought this question was fascinating. This comes from Jack Bennett 9803 on X. When evaluating a pitching prospect, how fast does a four-seamer need to be to compensate for a mediocre movement profile? Parentheses, this is a Brandon Sproat question. I like that, but we've had this conversation not only about Sproat. We've had this about Hunter Green in recent years. We've had this about Paul Skeens in recent years. And I feel like we always fall back on the idea that, hey, man, at the end of the day, it's 101. It's
Yeah,
100. And like, I do think that there is validity to that meme arc where it's like, no, it's suboptimal shape up top, but all the uneducated are saying who cares he throws 100, and all the ever wise are saying who cares he throws 100. I do feel like 99 or 100 is that magic number, but I mean 99, it's not the most uncommon thing in the world anymore, man.
No, and I think what we're seeing is like, and I think Chase Burns is the best example of that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him later, but like Burns is a phenomenal pitching prospect, but the fact that, and this really opened my eyes to where baseball is at. This is less of a slight on Chase Burns. The fact that Chase Burns and his 98, 99 mile per hour fastball
Yeah.
yielded an OPS over 900. And I know, Wake Forest, a hitter friendly. On the road, it was over 900 as well. Like it's suboptimal shape because it's straight over the top and it was just a plane that hitters just seem to see the ball well. But this is college we're talking
Yeah.
about. Hot bats, I don't care. Like college hitters are barreling 99 from a gargantuan human who has disgusting secondary stuff. Albeit they're probably just hunting fastball and that's it because his slider was probably the best pitch in the draft. But that was an eye-opening moment to me. It was like, guys are just primed for velo these days. Like we
Yeah.
talked about it with the arm issues and stuff like that as well. Where like you and I we're talking about being older, but like we're really not old, right? So it's like we graduated high school 10 years ago, and 10 years ago you touch 90 miles an hour, you're going D1.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like that's not the case at all, and these guys are facing 90 plus all the time. So you're so primed for it that it's just different now. The preparation for these hitters. So part of me almost it's tough because there's exceptions, and I think I wish I could answer this in like a cookie cut way, but one of the reasons why I love baseball is that you can't. And if it was all just spitting out numbers and oh well, if the fastball checks these three boxes, it can overcome this, then this show would probably be way lamer and
Yeah.
there'd be a lot less interest in prospect write-ups, scouting, all that good stuff. What I love is it's so fluid and so complex and there's exceptions to every rule and everything like that. What I will say is the number one thing that I think can help overcome fastball shape is everything but the fastball. It's what do you have outside of that? Because that's when the velocity shines through more, right? Like I think Skeens' fastball plays up because of the deception that he creates. But I also think the splinker was the best thing that ever happened to his fastball, right? If he was going fastball slider, he'd be successful because it's 100 and a nasty slider.
Yeah.
But hitters would then guess, and they'd guess correct more frequently, and guys can barrel 100. It wouldn't be easy, but guys would find it. Like it would happen. And now that you have to worry about the splinker too, like that's a whole different wrinkle where now you're playing Russian roulette essentially. And I think that's a big thing with Sproat here is that you can be geared up for 97, 98, 99, 100. We've seen him get up to 102, but you also have to be ready for a changeup, a cutter, a slider, and a curve.
Yep.
That's really tough. The other side would be location, right? Because 100 when it's hitting its spots is going to be a lot harder to barrel up as well. And a
Yep.
lot of the time, these guys that throw 100 and it's flat, well, it's also because they leave it over the middle. That was Hunter Green's big issue. It was
Yep.
the command side of it too, not control. Be like, oh, well, he doesn't walk anybody. Sprout command's definitely a wrinkle in this too. But like Hunter Green, he wasn't walking a ton of guys, but he also wasn't hitting his spots. And it was running back over the middle. And that's generally what happens, right? A lot of times with four seam fastballs that are 100 plus, you end up getting a little bit more arm side run than ride, and it just tends to run back over the middle. So I would say location and your secondaries for sure,
Yeah.
because it really becomes a guessing game for hitters. And the second that they feel like they know where it's going to end up on a trajectory basis, like once they know, okay, yes, it's going to be there really fat, like really quickly, but I know that it's not going to stay up the same way a Brian Wu fastball does or a Joe Ryan fastball does. They almost feel a little bit more confident there. Like, okay, I just got to get the barrel out. I don't even need to swing that hard. They're going to do the work for me, and I can trust that I'm going to get my barrel to the right spot.
Yeah.
That's where you have to make it harder for the hitter's guessing game, I think, at the end of the
Yes.
day.
Yeah, I do think that the mechanics you mentioned, Skeens, like it's a funky delivery with the crossfire and all that, but the splinker as well, like that is what took him from the best amateur pitching prospects in Strasburg to being arguably the best pitcher in baseball, like regardless of level coming into 2025. With Sproat, he's looking at something that, is probably similar to a Hunter Green arc where you've got promise and you elevate to a Cy Young contender. I think the best example of this is DeGrom, to be honest. And DeGrom, we talk about, being a beat off and all that. And we talk about his body not being anatomically ready to handle sitting 100 miles an hour. And I want to just look at the results from opposing hitters against Jacob DeGrom. In 2021, DeGrom sat 99-2 with his four-seamer. Opponents hit a buck 58 against him. Opponents hit 096 against his slider. In 2022, he sat 98-9 again with his four-seamer. Opponents hit 208. They hit a buck 39 against his slider. So the fastball was awesome, and the fastball, like, hey, opponents are hitting right around 200 or just under 200 against because it's really hard and because it jumps on you. But think about what that does to a non-sweeper, to a baby cut slider that DeGrom has. It makes his slider the best pitch in baseball.
Yep.
That's the beauty of the hard fastball.
Yep.
It benefits so many other things, like you mentioned.
The second you make hitters respect everything else, your fastball will be more effective. And this is assuming the shape's not great. Bobby Miller is the best example of this.
Yeah.
I don't think his stuff magically became substantially worse. I'm sure if we dove into the shape, there'll be some subtleties there.
Sure.
But the biggest thing with Bobby Miller this year was that nobody respected the spin. If he spotted 3 straight breaking balls for a strike, most of the hitters I saw, if you just look at the approach and the way that they were going about their ABs, would have happily tipped their cap and walked back to the dugout, which means they were geared up for 100 and said, locate that spin 3 times. And if you do that, you win. And he couldn't. And so when you're primed up for fastball and he can't locate the spin, you get ahead and you clip that fastball. Chase Burns, hitters did not feel like they had a chance. They hit below 100 against his breaking balls this past collegiate season. But they knew that there was a 50-50 chance they're getting a heater. So you knew where you had confidence that you could get to it, 50-50 chance you get a heater. The whiff rates were crazy on the fastball, but you can swing and miss twice at it. Just hit it the third time, right? Yeah. So that's the challenge, right? You want to make the guessing game as difficult as possible. But to specifically answer this question, because it did say how fast does a four-seamer need to be? I do think once you get north of the 100 range, the shape becomes less and less important. And it actually becomes increasingly difficult to have optimal shape once you get past 100. That's what makes Mason Miller so absurd, because he still somehow has optimal shape as well. Yep. I think once you exceed 100, like on average, shape becomes a lot less important. But I still do think all the other things matter a lot more, because hitters will time up just about anything nowadays. They do machine work from like 20 feet away and dial that shit up, man. And like, they'll time it up.
It's crazy just watching BP off of a machine. And a lot of minor league teams and big league teams will bring a machine out, and that will be what throws to them, but like instead of a coach that is throwing behind an L screen. And the machine's on field for BP. I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, you know what? Like a normal human being can go to a batting cage and make contact if they have any baseball experience. I'm looking at these machines on field and I'm like, there's no chance I'm touching this shit, dude. Like the machine's spitting 84 at them.
I can't hit right now, obviously, until the shoulder gets cleared. But I remember last year just going to the cages with some guys in pro ball and just saying, like, let me step in there just for one. I just want to see it and like admire and appreciate. I think I didn't even start my swing before it was behind me.
You're getting blown up.
And they're doing like foam balls to mimic vert as well. Mm-hmm. Dude, like it is a different game. You don't realize until you step in there. And I had just been watching for 45 minutes. And I'll be honest, I went in there. I didn't think I was going to barrel anything, but I was like, give me a few swings. I'll catch one.
I'll time it up. Yeah.
I needed 10 and I cheated. And it was just like, I was swinging before it was in there because I figured out how I need to start it here. But like, it was a full cheat, right? But like 9, not even close swings, like not even remote. Like, and the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, oh, I think I could time one up there. It's a different beast. And there's a reason why they're all using those machines and dialing them up, and these foam balls too. Like, again, when you get to train with that stuff, you can handle 100. But when you start mixing it in there, where like mixed machine, that's where guys like they get beat up.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's go to a Dodger question here. This one comes from MPAC 8_24 on X. I assume the numbers are a tribute to Kobe. Which Dodger shortstop prospect between Alex Freeland, Kellon Lindsey, Joendry Vargas, Emil Morales has the best chance to be the future shortstop for the LA Dodgers? The answer
Wow.
is E, Mookie Betts.
Yeah. None of the above, which is crazy. Um, so this is a great question because, I think you have there's quite a dichotomy here, right? Alex Freeland floor is so high. That guy's going to be a big leaguer for some time. Right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question about it. Except the ceiling is a little bit more capped with a Freeland, right? Where I think he has a good chance to be an above average regular. And usually that's not enough to move the needle for the Dodgers, where they're going to just trade you or use you as depth. And I do think Freeland backlogged behind even just a High Sun Kim and some of the other guys that they have made them a little bit more comfortable trading a Gavin Lux, because I think a switch hitting Freeland with a 15% chase rate and the chops to stick it short, and it seems like at this point is probably more defensively valuable than a Gavin Lux,
Yeah.
is a guy that you feel comfortable. Oh no, Miguel Rojas is banged up and Mookie is banged up. We can throw Alex Freeland in there and feel okay about it.
Yeah.
I just don't know if he's impactful enough for the Dodgers to, in 2026 say, all right, here's the keys, Alex Freeland. Shortstop is yours for the defending champs 2 times if they win it again next year. But even if they don't, like, then there's going to be more pressure to upgrade, right? So I just don't know if Freeland has enough there. I think for another team out there, he could absolutely be an everyday shortstop.
Yeah.
If he was traded to a handful of teams, he could probably be their opening day shortstop.
Right.
But I just think for the Dodgers standard, there may not be enough impact there offensively, though I do think, again, he can be a solid hitter. And then you go from there to the polar opposite. We're talking
Right.
about an 80 runner in Kellon Lindsey who has a swing that needs a ton of work.
Right.
And I trust that it'll get there, being that he's in the Dodgers organization. But they've gone the speedster route before early in the draft and with raw swings and not seen it work out as well. I'll pull a couple examples of that. Also, I'm not saying that to knock Lindsey, but to say that he's the shortstop of the future, need a lot of things to still happen. Joendry Vargas and Emil Morales are also kind of in a similar boat there, where I think what they've done at the Dominican Summer League and what we've seen from them production wise is really exciting. But I think there's multiple wrinkles here for both of those guys that have to be ironed out here. One
Yeah.
is Emil Morales going to be able to match that production at more challenging levels? Same with Joendry Vargas. And then are they sticking it short? Like, those are two major questions there. I have pretty significant concern, relatively speaking, with Emil Morales in terms of, like, I think the hype versus the underlying is as big of a dichotomy as we have right now, where
Yeah.
like Dodgers prospect who put up video game numbers. And I feel like I'm trying to be like an edgelord by saying, like, oh, I'm not that high on him.
Yeah, but like it was the DSL, right? And like sometimes you see some insane numbers at the DSL that have like minimal validity.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
there's validity to this because
Yeah.
he chased at a 16% clip and ran a ground ball rate below 30%.
Yeah.
But this was a guy that he's just a man among boys out there. He doesn't chase at all, like I said, and elevates consistently, and was just hammering fastballs. Hit 400 against fastballs. Like, that helps a ton. The whiff rates were kind of high. And he was just incredibly selective and didn't chase. And I do think could be a candidate to move over to third. I think Vargas could also potentially be a candidate to move off at the position as well. So, like, legitimately speaking, I think the answer is nobody. And that's not to totally bash either of these guys. It's just like, I think it's a reminder of where we get sometimes with these DSL and complex prospects. And I'm guilty of it too sometimes. I mean, look at how much we've talked about Jesus Mate, but also Jesus Mate backs it up with, I think, the underlying data. And if you look at the swing, it's a little bit different. I like Vargas a little bit more. And I think there's some things that may translate a little bit more clearly. But I think both of these guys with the underlying yellow flags, the swing mechanics that need some work, and neither like have the EVs that you would expect. They're young. There's still plenty of time, but I don't know. I think it would be very, very presumptive to project either of them, any of these guys really, as being the shortstop of the future. But if I had to
Right.
pick one, I'd probably go with Kellon Lindsey just because
Okay.
of the athleticism. It's just way more explosive than everybody else. And he's an 80 grade runner. And I just think there's a little bit more around supporting him,
Yeah.
in terms of the tools and what would translate than a Joendry Vargas and Emil Morales. But Freeland would be the safest answer if they ever wanted to go the lower ceiling route.
So you just provided color on what would have been my real answer to the question, and it would have been a question. What is the standard for the shortstop of the LA Dodgers? Because the standard has changed a decent bit. And I think your answer of Kellon Lindsey tells me exactly what I need to know. Where your standard is, we want to get back to the Seager, Trey Turner type of shortstop for the LA Dodgers. Miguel Rojas has been that guy for the last year or so. And like, hey, you know what? After Trey left, they've been piecemealing it together, and it's been fine. They won a World Series with Miguel Rojas pretty much functioning as their primary shortstop, and then Tommy Edman, who is going to play center field for them, playing shortstop, and then Mookie Betts playing a little bit of shortstop. If you want a consistent face there, and you're willing to have him be the 8 hitter in the best lineup in baseball, I think Freeland is the answer.
Yeah.
But the LA Dodgers are shooting a little bit higher than that. So I think that is the answer there. Like, it really depends on what you want the shortstop of the LA Dodgers to be. Now, I think that can be different than the Yankee perception of what the shortstop of the Yankees should be because it's Jeter. Like, everybody wants the next shortstop of the Yankees to be Jeter. Is Volpe going to be Jeter? Was Didi Gregorius going to be Jeter? Who are you comparing Alex Freeland to? Who are you comparing Kellon Lindsey to? And I have no idea what the right answer is, but it sounds like some people will say we want our next Seager or Turner, and some are saying we just want somebody that'll play there 150 times a year.
Exactly. And I think short term, you could see okay, we got to plug Freeland in. But yeah, this is the Dodgers. And if you're trying to project the shortstop of the future, they want that dynamic, potentially franchise altering guy. And who knows, Morales may end up growing into more strength, shoring up the defense, and he could be a monster. Nothing would surprise me, especially in the Dodgers organization and with the numbers that we've seen these guys put up. But Lindsey, he's explosive, man. Like this guy was the best runner in the draft, has a good chance to develop into a good defender there. And the swing is behind because he's playing football and doing a lot of different things. But if he can get himself there and the swing continues to come along, like yeah, that's a guy that can legitimately be one of the most explosive athletes at a premium position. I mean, in the major leagues, for the Dodgers, it's probably the best bet.
Yep. We're going to keep ripping through these questions, but before that, we will take a quick break. From the Dodgers to the Minnesota Twins. This question comes to us from @Zach Landy on X. And the question is, what are the chances that Emmanuel Rodriguez, Walker Jenkins, and Luke Keaschall are in the same lineup together at some point this season? Parentheses, AAA or MLB. It's interesting, and I love that little caveat at the end because I think it's more likely that it happens in AAA in June than it does in the big leagues at any point this year. You've got Keaschall working his way back into the field, coming back from Tommy John surgery. And then you have two guys that have yet to put together even close to a full minor league season.
Yeah.
So, like, the progression should have been very different for all of these guys. And I think Emmanuel Rodriguez and Keaschall should have matched up decently well. But the fact that Walker Jenkins looked that good in so few games in high A and in double A makes me think that Rodriguez is going to deal with his like dink and dunk injuries. Keaschall's going to build up in triple A, and Jenkins is going to hit his way there. And the St. Paul Saints are going to be must-watch television on MILB TV in like June.
Hell yeah. That would be fun as much as I want to see Emmanuel at the big league level. Can I also just say that this was a genius way, assuming that Zach Landy's a Twins fan, genius way to get us to talk about all three of like their top prospects.
Yeah.
Because like there's no way to properly answer this question without talking about each of the three.
Right.
And I don't know, like there's no other like question you could really frame. Like if it was like a rank them, we're not going to take that one because we're going to do that when we do the twin system.
Right,
So
right.
wonderfully done, Zach. Because like laying the land, I think you nailed it. I would say that the chances are, I would say 60-40 no, just because I think the Twins need Emmanuel Rodriguez at the big league level. We'll see how they go about the offseason and everything. But I mean, if that guy has a strong spring training, we talked about the break camp episode and everything like that. I think he needs a little bit more time. But if he has a strong spring training and Byron Buxton inevitably goes down, or just is it just needs to be managed more than anticipated, you're going to want that guy up there. Or it's not even just that. What if Larnach goes down? What if Wallner's really struggling? Like, this is a team that still wants to be competitive. And, like, you have a guy that does have the ability to come up there, even though he played 30 games essentially this past year. He was really good when we saw them, can play a good center field. He can come up there and make an impact immediately. It could be that Edouard Julien situation where he just comes up and walking, running into balls. But the difference is he's going to give you value on the base paths. He's going to play all three outfield spots. Like, I could see the Twins saying, you know what? He gets hurt all the time anyways. Let's see what he can do up here. Mm-hmm. Jenkins is going to need a little bit more time probably before he gets to AAA, I'd imagine, because he only played about 7 games at the AA level. And then Keaschall's hurt. So I think Keaschall and Jenkins are going to be on very similar timelines. Maybe Jenkins gets to AAA a little bit quicker. And I definitely think those guys are going to be teammates. But I think if Emmanuel Rodriguez is playing with Walker Jenkins and Luke Keaschall, to your point off the jump here, I think that means something went wrong with Emmanuel Rodriguez.
Yes. And unfortunately, I'm not sitting here saying that nothing is going to go wrong with Emmanuel Rodriguez, because if history has told us anything, and if the last 3 years have told us anything, it's that he's going to have a setback at some point. And that sucks, but I'm sure you know, Zach, like, welcome to Minnesota Twins baseball. This happens to everybody. This happens to Brooks. This happens to Royce. This happens to Buxton. This happens to Correa. This happens to literally everybody. Unfortunately, it happened to Kirilloff before he retired, before he turned 30. Like, everybody is dealing with stuff. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's an org thing. I don't know if it's ignoring some certain flags at a physical.
Brooks Lee was an example of ignoring certain flags.
I mean, dude, yeah, but like, you knew he had back problems at Cal Poly, and then guess what happens when he gets into pro ball? Like, oh, lower back thing. And like, that sucks, but you could have seen that when he was at Cal Poly. So like, it sucks for me to sit here and say it's more likely than not that Emmanuel Rodriguez misses some time, but I mean, that is just what history has told us with him.
I hope, obviously that's not the case, but yeah, I mean, we'd be ignoring like the outlier season for him of if we want to just go 2022, 2023, 2024, 47 games in 2022, 99 games in 2023, 47 games in 2024. Like the big campaign was 99 games. So it's definitely a concern. And odds are like they may even want to be cautious with him. And even if there's a little flare up, he's going to hit the 7-day IL. Like, yeah. They're going to be careful with him. So, yeah, I lean towards no on the side of optimism, but the most likely scenario may be that he's banged up and takes some time down there. But it would be must-see TV if those three were together in St. Paul. And I think Keaschall is going to come back a little bit quicker than people think because he can still DH, and he was doing that at the end of the year anyways, and they just want to see that guy hit. I think they know he's a good athlete. Yeah. He showed that he was actually kind of comfortable in center field. And you can put him at first in the meantime to ease him back in. You can play second. You can put him in left. Like, I think they're confident that they'll be able to stash him at a different position once he's ready. So I don't think they'll be as worried about the defensive reps with him, as crazy as that sounds, because it's kind of like we were just talking about Nick York and how he just weirdly looks comfortable everywhere. Yeah. And you talked about that in Indy. Like, I think he's cut from a similar cloth where Luke Keaschall is just going to weirdly look comfortable everywhere.
I told you Brendan Donovan was going to get sexy, and like York might be Brendan Donovan and Keaschall might be Brendan Donovan, and we're cooking with gas here because you see the value there, man.
I 100% have a bias to those types of players. I will put that on record. Like,
dude, I do too. Are you kidding? Those guys are awesome. Too. They're so valuable. Like, who doesn't want a Swiss Army knife that's going to hit?
And like give you defensive value at like a lot of different spots and do all the little things. I mean, yeah, it allows you to, as a general manager, to address needs as they come to you instead of like, oh, we have to get a third baseman and nothing else. It's, oh, well, there's a second baseman on the market for cheap. We'll just move Donovan over here and then we'll go get a second baseman. You know, you can go about it in different ways. So I mean, that I would try to stockpile those types of players.
Yep. Let's talk about those fighting fish, man. This one comes from Moritsugo.Ryan on Instagram. Who are the double A or lower level Marlins prospects Aram is excited about? And I like this question because you've got a lot of guys that either debuted at the end of the year. Like, I think a lot of Marlins fans are excited about what Norby showed at the end of the year. And then you talk about the triple A guys like, hey, look at Davison, look at Augustine Ramirez. And then you see other guys, like I'm thinking about a Robbie Snelling, I'm thinking about a Thomas White too. I want to know guys that are a little bit lower, like
Yeah.
Jupiter, Beloit. Who are you excited about when it comes to this build of the project?
Well, can I just start and say this show is going to be cooking on the lower levels this season now that I live in Florida
Yeah,
because there is so much talent down here. And it's not just the Marlins. I mean, the Marlins are way more enjoyable to watch now at the low A, high A level and everything like that. But when we're talking about the Florida State League this year, we're going to have Connor Griffin. We're going to have Bryce Rayner. We're going to have a lot of dudes out here. I still think Carson Benj is going to start the year probably out here. Maybe they'll sign him to high A. We'll see. But there are so many good players and a lot of, I would say, a lot of the IFA guys that are going to get a chance in low A. So I am pumped to cover the Florida State League this year. It's great timing moving down here. And
yeah,
I think there's going to be no shortage of talent there. But with the Marlins, like I love that you mentioned, I think there's a reason for Marlins fans to be a little bit optimistic is a lot of their top end prospect talent is already getting to the upper levels now. So you can start to see that wave of talent coming along here. But in the last few trades that they've made, there's been kind of that focus on the wave behind that as well, because not all those upper level prospects are going to work out, and you want to have a wave of players as well. But also, if they're going to operate like the Rays, you're hoping to always have those waves. So
yeah,
looking at the lower levels, there's a definitely an emphasis on hitting on the draft. They went with two high school guys. I'm very excited to see how PJ Orlando looks.
yeah,
And that's more of just to find out. That's
yeah.
not about like my favorite prospects. I just haven't seen a ton of Orlando. I thought Carter Johnson, the numbers may not jump off the page, but what he did, like look at all the other high school guys, they did not get assigned straight to low A. Carter Johnson did, and he actually held his own. So I thought there was a lot to be impressed with there. But in terms of the players that like I'm most excited about, like I'm eager to find out more about those guys and see them, especially in Orlando. But excited about, I got to go Dylan Head because that's a guy that I know you've been a big fan of. We've liked
Yeah.
him since he was with the Padres. He gets traded over to the Marlins. Unfortunately, that hip issue wipes out his season, and we didn't really get to see anything last year. This is a guy that is an explosive athlete, dynamic. I think the power is undersold. I'm not saying it's to be a big part of his game, but he definitely can go gap to gap and sneak in some pop to the pull side. And I'm just excited to see that now that he's presumably healthy and see if he's stronger, what that all looks like. I still am a big believer in Dylan Head. And then like a Starlene Caba, I have so much fun going into defensive video and in real time going in person to be able to see guys defend in the infield, especially at shortstop. I can't wait to watch that guy go about his business, in the infield. But if I had to pick one, it's got to be a healthy Dylan Head because I do think that I hate to talk about like organizational X factors,
Yeah.
but it would really alter the perception of the Marlins farm system if Dylan Head is playing like we think he can when he was a top 100 prospect for us right after the draft and is, looking like a consensus top 100 guy like he can be and a true center fielder who can really go get it out there. And I know the Marlins were really impressed with his ability to play defense even through the hip issue. Like if he is playing like the guy he can be, that really gives his system a lot of layers that I think would be really easy to get excited about.
It's a top 100 prospect, man. Like if he looks healthy, that was a guy that was in the mid to high 80s for us going into last year,
Yeah.
right? Even before the
Yep.
trade. Like going into that before the Arise deal, we looked at Head as a guy that is tooled out of his freaking mind. And you mentioned, the pop like okay, say you're gap to gap. Like that guy could lead the league in doubles because he's a 70 grade runner. He might be close to an 80 runner. He's one of the fastest guys in minor league baseball. I think after you get past a Chandler Simpson, like I do think you hit that next clump of a Justin Crawford and a Dylan Head where they're just going to absolutely fly.
Yeah.
And if you have that to go along with a guy that's never going to whiff in Xavier Edwards and a guy that can be a gold glove caliber shortstop down the line in the Starlene Caba and a guy that can really hit at the catching position in Augustine Ramirez, all of a sudden, like you have this group of hitters to complement a Yuri Perez, who could very well be a top 5 arm in baseball when he's back healthy, and then Thomas White and Noble and Snelling when he bounces back, if he bounces back. Like there's a vision to see here, and I think the vision is in Jupiter, and I think the vision is in Beloit.
Especially because I think, yeah, like you mentioned, you can see those upper level guys. If the development side of things, that's a big test with the Marlins here is, is it different now? You can really start to be optimistic about the future if Dylan Head is unlocking things and
Yeah.
Starling Caba is starting to look like a more complete hitter and PJ Morlando looks like a good pick and Carter Johnson looks like a good pick. Like it doesn't have to be all of those things, but again, also a Dylan Head positive outcome in 2025 takes a little bit of the pressure off of you need both Carter Johnson and PJ Morlando to look solid out of the gate. So I'm really excited about it. I'm curious to also see how agile, nimble, what the growing pains may be, or the returning, just rust may be off of that hip. It's
Yeah.
not easy. It is easier when you're 19 getting that surgery, so that does help. But hip stuff is no joke. So hopefully he's as quick as he was before, and I think he will be, given how young he is and everything. And but I got to say that's top of my list of players I'm excited to see, and would really, I think, help hammer home the vision of where the Marlins are headed.
Unfortunate that there's no Kiner Benitez dialogue here, although that would be the second time that we brought Kiner Benitez up on this episode. So,
I'm bringing it up at the end.
okay, great. Let's go to a really interesting question that we talked about before we even hit the record button. This is from @ShawBrian_ on X. What are some of your favorite prospects that are in bad organizations for their development? And we talked about how to interpret this question before we hit the record button. Are you talking just like the best prospects in organizations that are notoriously not great at developing their talent when they get there? Because if that was the case, then you go to a Dolander and a Christian Moore, right? Like you go to organizations that haven't done a good job in recent memory and you just take their top prospect. But I looked at it as who are some guys that are in organizations that have not been great at developing that type of player that I think would be looked at in a much more positive light if they were in a different organization. And I wrote some names down. I know you wrote some names down here that are pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So what I love about this question too is like I think I interpreted it a little bit more like just the best prospects in bad organizations, and the way that you explained it to me actually made it the way you interpreted it, I think way more of a fun conversation, and just some more interesting layers to it. But I do want to like clarify here too. You're not necessarily saying that you don't think that they will be unlocked because they're in this organization. It's more like I think people would be more bullish on them and or more excited about them if they were in like the Dodgers or the Rays org,
Yeah.
for example.
So I'll get my first one out of the way here. Colorado drafted Brody Brecht this year. Brody Brecht, the right-hander at Iowa that at 104 miles an hour and was, a Big Ten wide receiver that ditched football to pitch and do that full time. Brody Brecht had as crazy a stuff as any pitcher in the 2024 draft, as crazy a stuff as Burns, as crazy a stuff as Hagen Smith. But the command was putrid at Iowa. So he goes to Colorado, who has not developed a pitcher in recent memory. And Dolander has become a top 30 prospect in baseball or a top 40 prospect in baseball
Doesn't
because
count.
he's the Dolander at Tennessee. Like they
Yeah.
didn't need to touch him. You know what
He
I mean?
figured it out. Yeah.
Brecht is a guy that like an organization would need to get their hands on and help improve in terms of just sheer strike throwing.
Yeah.
So I look at Brody Brecht and I say, if he was in Tampa's system or Cleveland's system or the Dodgers system or even the Yankees system, we're talking about this guy as a rocket ship versus now it's like, is he going to throw strikes or is he just Riley Pint again?
Yep. No, I think it's very valid. I think it's very, very valid. And you hope that Brody Brecht goes to like a third party, and throws his
Yeah.
pens with
Tread.
yeah,
Yeah.
with a tread or and it clicks for him there. But the challenge is, you go to those places, they give you your plans, but sometimes the teams will give you a different plan. And sometimes it's harder to enact that plan with the team when you don't have those coaches available with you and the people kind of just to be on top of it. So that's why the situation can be tough. But there's a world where just Brecht being a freak athlete and everything makes it all work there. And yeah, not necessarily saying it won't happen, but absolutely, if he's with the Rays or the Dodgers, or the Yankees or the Red Sox, even like you're looking at him and saying, "Oh man, let's see what they get out of him." And is it a
Right.
guarantee? No, but you know that they're probably going to give it closest to the best shot that he has versus the Rockies. It's like, can he defy the odds and make it
Right.
happen? Yeah, that's as good of an example I think as you can pull on that one. I had another name right off the top of my head and I didn't write it down, and now I'm going to need to try to pull it back up. But Rainer Arias is an
Mhm.
example for me. And I know it's interesting to mention the Giants because like they're not as infamous as some of these other organizations, but like look at the last few years. I think it's going to get better now that Farhan's out of there,
Yeah.
which is but at the same time, like I think Posey is going to be good for a lot of things. We'll see how he is in terms of player development. They promoted Zach Manassian, right? So like
Yeah.
not a ton has changed in terms of the infrastructure. And when you look at the way that they have struggled to develop talent here,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear. And I've been talking about it for a while. And I know in the beginning it was like I got a little bit of pushback on that. I don't think you can really have any pushback on this now. And I'm not blaming them for Rainer Arias not succeeding, right? Rainer Arias has been very banged up. And I think injuries have been a big part of the reason why he has not been able to put together the numbers that he is capable of putting up. I mean, we saw
Yeah.
what he did in a limited sample in 2023. And then last year, again, there's like wrist, hand, all these different issues held him back. So it's not that he has not done it yet because of the Giants, but I'm looking at a guy that we've been very, very high on, a guy that I've been very excited about since I was able to get looks at him in 2023.
Yeah.
I think the power and speed combination and the approach and like the swing is so good. Like, I think he's in a great spot, but I am a little wary that like if he does, hit some adversity in more challenging levels, assuming he's able to stay healthy, like are the Giants the best spot to be in to develop as a hitter? Recent history would probably say no. You have Bryce Eldridge as an example. I think
Yeah.
that's more of a scouting success, and we'll continue to see, how he progresses. I think he's going to be a great player. Again, I think that's a scouting success. I don't
Yeah.
think there was much that happened developmentally there. When he started, the first few swings I saw him taking pro ball, it was whoa, he's ahead. You know,
Right.
I like what's the most recent example of a successful Giants development story? You can't say Elliot Ramos
No, you
because I
can't.
think he ran out of options and went somewhere else and figured it out that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm waiting on Luis
You can't say
Matos.
well, and you can't say Pat Bailey because Pat Bailey was a college kid that is an 85 WRC plus at this point. Like it's not like he's turned into an elite hitter.
And then I'm trying to think of bats like Casey Schmidt. I love him. It's not because of the bat, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but
he's a
that's also
solid
who
hitter.
he was in college, man. Like there were a lot of guys. Like I'm thinking of the last high schooler IFA guy that they have taken pretty much from scratch and blossomed. And yeah, I like the point that you bring up with Buster Posey, but think about who Buster Posey was. Did that guy need much player development in the minor
No,
leagues? He won the
no.
Golden Spikes. He hit 463 with 26 homers in
Yeah,
his draft year at Florida State. He was the
yeah,
player of the year. He won the ACC Triple Crown. So it's like he was already a big league product when he was at Florida State, man. Like,
yep.
what does this guy know about player development? And I'm sure he knows a good bit because he's a a Hall of Fame caliber player. I don't think he's gonna make the Hall of Fame, but like,
I think he does. That's
you
my
think
that's my
he does?
I think he gets in. I hope so. But I could
Interesting.
it'll be interesting. That's a whole nother combo. But no,
Right.
like it is true. Like I mean, maybe he recognizes it and has a different perspective, and I'd love to hear that from him. But like I think the biggest shortcoming of Derek Jeter is that he didn't have a concept of that. Oh, no, his was a little bit different because I think he
Yeah.
was jaded. Scouts were like didn't like him or whatever. So what do they know anyways? But the Marlins player development was as bad as it's ever been when
Yes.
Derek Jeter was at the helm because it wasn't that important to Derek Jeter. He thought he could compensate for everything by making players sprint everywhere and just call it the Yankee way.
So my best example of this is Patrick Ewing coaching at Georgetown. Like Patrick Ewing had all of these like 4 or 5 star centers that were coming to play for Georgetown because they were going to learn from one of the best centers in the history of basketball. And then they get on campus and they're winning 10 games a year and Patrick Ewing is looking at them and it's like, "Why can't you just be me?"
Be
And
me.
their answer is because I'm not Patrick Ewing. Like I just wonder if we're going to run into something like that with Buster Posey. I hope we don't. I don't think we will because I
I
think
don't
he
think so
surrounded
either.
himself with the right people.
Exactly. But, they did promote a guy internally, though. So we'll
Yeah.
see. I do think ultimately maybe there's a growing pain there. They adjust and then he hires the right person. Posey's just so smart and well spoken, and is so experienced. And I always lean towards the catchers, maybe having a little bit of a different perspective there. But like, there's a reason why Peyton Manning said, like, I don't think I could ever really coach. Like, it would just be
Yeah.
too difficult for me.
Like, why
So
can't you just be me? Why can't you see this? Because
yeah,
you're Peyton effing Manning, and I'm not.
exactly, exactly. And it's hard to argue that the game came easier to many people other than Buster Posey. But I'm looking through it like year by year by year. There's a lot of lower level prospects that have been hyped up. And usually that means they got the tools and then it's stalled out. Remember Jairo Pomares,
Oh,
Luis
yeah.
Toribio. Like there's a lot of guys in that system I was excited about. It just didn't happen.
Averson Arteaga. Come on, man.
Yep. I mean, and now we're seeing it with Walker Martin. But Rainer Arias is probably my example there.
Okay.
I know you have one or two more.
I've got a couple more. Two bats that jumped out to me. It's not like the Pirates have this great history of developing bats, and Connor Griffin is a guy that is going to need a good bit of player development. The tools are absolutely insane. I think if he was in another organization like a Tampa or like a Dodgers, we're talking about Connor Griffin as being, like you are Team Rayner over Griffin.
It's
I think
so
that,
razor thin. I was just doing the first year player draft rankings, by the way, which
yeah.
that article will be out in a day or two. From a fantasy perspective, I ranked Griffin over Rayner. So like it's so razor thin.
There you go. But like, if Griffin was in a better situation for him to blossom in the lower levels, I think you're like, oh, Connor Griffin. Like, I trust X organization to get the most out of Connor Griffin, and I don't know if you can do that with the Pirates at this point under
That's
this
valid.
current regime. The other one is George Wolkow with the White Sox. 80 grade raw power, like some of the craziest power that you've ever seen, but he swings and misses all the freaking time. Do you trust the White Sox to help him optimize his swing mechanics? You shouldn't.
No. Yeah, I trust the White Sox from a pitching perspective a little bit more now, but
Yeah,
from a hitting perspective, like I love
not
the
yet.
changes that Edgar Caro made last year. I hope that those came from the White Sox and not
Right.
not him. But yeah, I mean the precedent is kind of set there to not be incredibly trustworthy
Yeah.
of what they're doing there.
Yeah. A couple arms that I wanted to mention too. Alex Clemmy, I was really excited about because he was a tall, long lefty from a New England high school that was drafted by the Guardians, and I was like, okay, let's do this. Now that he's in Washington and they have a sign at their spring training complex that says, I don't care how fast you throw ball four, I start to worry about his ability to develop as a pitcher. And then another guy, Cincinnati, like you look at what that organization is in terms of starting pitching, and you see Hunter Green, who was amazing as a high school prospect. And I feel like a lot of Hunter Green's success should be attributed to Hunter Green and not necessarily the Reds organization. And then everybody else, like Andrew Abbott, college kid, he was pretty much a finished product when he left UVA. Lodolo was college kid. He looked like a big league ready starter when he left TCU. They have so many guys like that. I question their ability with a guy like Adam Serwinowski, who's a very unorthodox lefty that throws hard and struck out a ton of guys in the lower levels this year. How can they help him optimize to become a major
Yep.
league ready starting pitcher?
I think that's very, very valid. And like the Chase Burns situation, at least you have like the Hunter Green template right
Yeah,
there. It's just
yeah,
right there. But yeah, it's a little bit different there as well. I similar to that Adam Macko for me with the Blue
hmm
Jays. It's arm I've always liked. 24 years old, but you look at the whiff numbers, the stuff like really impressive overall. The surface level numbers weren't great. This is a guy that has had some inconsistency health wise. Like when he's healthy, he's sitting 95 or at least 90. I should say sitting 94. But we saw him at the last 3, 4 starts at the end of 2023. He
right.
averaged 95. It's not a coincidence that his final four. I mean, we talked about this on the show. Actually, completely forgot about this. His final couple outings of the year. So last 4 outings of 2023, Adam Macko was sitting 95 miles per hour with the fastball, 20 innings, 1 earned run, 31 Ks. That was at the high A level. This past year, velo was 92, 93, and then it slipped to 91, 92 at the end of the year. He's had that history of inconsistency with health, and he could be a little bit more polished with the strike throwing. The
Yeah.
Blue Jays, when it comes to, and I know a lot of it's out of your control with pitchers, but there's something with the Blue Jays, man, where like it just seems like every arm left and right has been going down, and like I have some concern that Mako may not be in the best situation for himself there to properly develop as a pitcher.
Yep, I totally hear you on that. Okay, a couple more here. We've got two quick ones at the end, but two legit ones that I think are going to spur good conversations here. This one is based on player comps, and you mentioned the Chase Burns Hunter Green template there. What are a few of your favorite MLB player to prospect comparisons? This is from at Loose and Groovy Baseball Show on
Yeah.
Instagram. The only one that I wrote down was Chase Burns to Hunter Green because that's a guy with, crazy fastball velo, suboptimal fastball shape, a really good breaking ball, and it's a question of command of the fastball. It's also, same organization and you feel like you have the template there. But this opens up a whole can of worms that I know you want to get into because shoehorning these comps is like your biggest bugaboo in baseball media.
Yeah, no, and I like the way that people ask them. Like in this lens, I like it because it's like, what's your favorite one? And there are some great examples of like this player reminds me of this player. I like using comps to be able to show the whole story here. And I think
Yeah.
where comps get misused now because they're fun and I get it, but they become unfair to players is like it's to just illustrate the upside.
Yeah.
And I think a comp to just illustrate the upside is more of an unfair comparison
Yeah.
than really just a player comparison, right? It's like it's what you can dream on, and I think that side of it is fine. You can say, and that's where at times I'll say you can see shades of this
Yeah.
or that, but I think where we get a little bit carried away in the industry is just comping them outright to a player that would be like the peak outcome. Where I like to do the comps and where I think it's actually fun is does this player have similar shortcomings, similar strengths, and then does this help you understand what he can be ultimately? And like that's why it's super specific, but like Grant McCray to Trent Grisham was
Yeah.
like like that comp screamed to me and I was like, boom, that's actually like how I can illustrate what it looks like for me with McCray. I don't have a ton of confidence in the hit tool. He has a ton of bat speed where he's going to just be able to run into enough home runs and be a higher BABIP guy because he's fast. And then the glove's elite,
Yeah.
and that's going to always help. Like I saw that kind of in the patience and things like that. I saw that kind of outlook, but where it's just this is a really good player. Let's comp him to one of the best players in Major League Baseball, just because they play a similar position and maybe swing slightly similar, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That's where I get frustrated because I think it's unfair to the player. And I always use like Jason Dominguez as a prime example of that, but there's a lot of examples of that.
For sure. Like I'm thinking about and one that we've seen that like there's totally validity to what you can dream on with Kobe Mayo. You can dream on Austin Riley with Kobe Mayo, but
Yes.
is Kobe Mayo a direct comparison to Austin Riley? No.
No.
Like we're talking about the ceiling. We're talking about what Kobe Mayo's 100th percentile outcome would look like, and it's MVP candidate Austin Riley. But yeah, it is tough, and it's like I feel like it's a little bit easier with pitchers
I was
because
about to say that because
you have
you
release
can do
point
some
like yeah,
similarity on individual pitches, and then
yeah.
if it's an arsenal that really overlaps with another arsenal, absolutely you can highlight that. Um, I think that's a great shout there because yeah, there's a lot of overlap there that you can, point towards. And I think it's
Yeah.
actually very helpful with pitchers. Like I like to do
Yeah.
it like the individual write-ups. It's this guy's slider is similar to this guy's slider
Right.
and so on and so forth. But with hitters, yeah, it feels like you can start to get a little bit more like reckless at times. That
Yeah.
said, I'm trying to think there's got to be a few more comps that I've thrown out there that I genuinely like actually support and like. I'm trying.
I like the pitching delivery comps. There are a couple that have jumped out. You keyed me into the Hagen Smith Garrett Crochet thing. Like that delivery is very similar.
It is.
Very. I put Brody Hopkins right next to Ben Joyce in terms of delivery, where that's a
Ooh,
guy working down on the mound, like it's so leggy, and then all of a sudden the arm just explodes from like right next to his ear, almost like a quarterback. I like those type of things where you can see a guy's delivery and you can almost guess like what type of arsenal plays from that slot. There are a lot of guys that have that longer arm swing, and I'm like, okay, you know who else really succeeds with a longer arm swing is Luis Castillo. Like if you can find a way to turn your thumb, like pronate just a little bit, you could find a changeup because this guy is good at that.
absolutely. And I think that's again where it's a little bit more clear cut and you can feel confident with
Yeah.
those, types of comparisons.
Yeah.
I think with so it's this really weird specific one. I kind of like comparing like the peak production that you can dream on to a specific season as well, just to
Sure.
provide some like context. This isn't peak production, but like Connor Griffin, I was looking at him and I'm like, okay, tools are insane. I like him best in center, where I think he can be an elite center fielder,
Yeah.
but he can also plug in and play a great shortstop. I just think elite center field is going to be great for a guy that's that big and fast. And I'm like, I think a high, an outcome that you can be looking forward to is with Connor Griffin is like the 20, because the hit tool is the biggest concern, right? Is 2024 Brenton Doyle. And like, so those are the examples of just trying to give you an idea. Cause I know a lot of people like, you haven't seen the player play, you don't have data and like whatever. It's what is it going to ultimately look like? That's where I
Yeah.
like it as well, where it's like, am I saying he's going to be Brenton Doyle? No, I think that the hit tool is probably going to be ahead of where Brenton Doyle's was at his age and things like
Right.
that. And there's potential to be a lot better than Brenton Doyle. But I think when you're looking at like what could a solid outcome be from a production standpoint, what could the statistics look like, what could the value look like, like it could look a lot like 2024 Brenton Doyle. So that's where I like to do that as well, and that's probably one of my favorite comparisons there. Another one would be like a Blake Mitchell to a Cal Raleigh light, right?
Yeah.
Light, where I don't know if he's going to be as elite defensively. He's really damn good. He's going to be a good defender, but the
Yeah.
power, swing and miss, walk, like giving you an idea of what it will look like. Am I saying he's going to be Cal Raleigh and be arguably top two catcher in the game? Probably not, but it can be a similar type of way of achieving value and success in terms of how you do it.
Yeah, totally get that. Okay, one more true dialogue question here. This comes to us from at Giants Cursed on X. Did you forget about the three World Series in the 2010s? Like,
Oh, this guy's great. So he's also the one that let us have it for mocking Verlander to the Giants in their playing GM episode. And then immediately was like, I owe you an apology. And I quote tweeted his own tweet. So that was awesome. But no, he's great. Like just like I will say there's certain fans, man, that you don't realize how good you had it. Like you
right?
have those World Series rings. Like fans would kill to be in that situation. The Giants are not cursed. I know it feels like it over the last handful of years, but they're even not even that far removed from like a
They won
ridiculous regular season.
107 games in
Yeah.
2021.
So I hear you, but I don't hear you.
His question is, what are some underrated prospects? Who are some underrated prospects who had down years last year and you view as fluky and could bounce back? It's interesting. And like I look at, some guys like a Robbie Snelling was the first name that came to
Okay.
mind
Yeah.
for me. Like he was just baseball's minor league pitcher of the year, and then all of a sudden it just disappeared. And I have much more confidence in a Robbie Snelling bouncing back as opposed to like a Connor Phillips whose pitch shapes changed entirely. But I have a
Hmm.
couple more shouts as well.
Yeah, I would go Jefferson Rojas with the
Hmm.
Cubs. It was not his best year, right? He had a 646 OPS between, I think it was I think completely high A, but not 100% all year. And even then, he was 18 years old, just turned 19 right at the start of the season, like a month into the season, being challenged at high A. Great contact rates. They were challenging him at second or at shortstop, and now I think playing a little bit more second base. Probably may ultimately play second base long term. I think he's passable at short, but probably move him over there. But even through the frustrating year in a challenging assignment, ran an in zone contact rate just below 90%. The approach is strong. The EVs are fine. Like I think this is a guy that had some bad batted ball luck, was challenged, and I think it all just kind of mounted on him. And as an 18/19-year-old, I think Rojas is going to have a really solid bounce back year this coming season for the Cubs. I don't know if I'll probably repeat high A and keep him in South Bend, and I think he's going to put up good numbers there.
I like that shout. Somebody cut from a similar cloth for me was Ariel Amador. Like
Yeah.
Amador is a guy that like can't hit 210. I know that that happened in Hartford, and this was just a year from hell for him. But that was another guy that top 100 prospect. He's a hell of a lot better than what he did in 2024.
I like that shot a lot, even though it was better at the end. It just you look at the cumulative numbers and like, how did that happen? I think seeing him shore things up down the stretch has to have you feeling more confident about where he's headed. And I agree. I think he's gonna have a nice year this coming season and get a chance to make an impact at the big league level. And I think he can handle it this time around.
Yeah,
If these guys will actually be ready for it.
yeah. couple other names that jumped out to me. Brady House was a guy that like you
I was
looked at
thinking
what
about
he
him.
did in 23 and then in 24. It was really not great in 24 at the AAA level with Rochester, but I do think that this guy can bounce back, and I think he can start in spring training. And he still projects as a huge piece to the future in Washington. I don't know if Ethan Salas is a fair answer here, but
I was also thinking about him.
he was young as shit. Like
Yeah.
we have to give him a little bit more time, and even if that involves a repeat in Fort Wayne, like that's okay. He's going to be a heck of a lot better than a 600 OPS.
No doubt. He's just, what we were always talking about is he's not the consensus top 20 prospect yet until
Right.
we see some more things. But I think you and I came away impressed in the fall league and, saw a guy that's definitely a top 100 prospect. Definitely, I think in the middle range of the top 100. But, I remember if you had him outside of your top 12 or 13, people were like, way
Why do
too
you
low,
hate him?
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, like no, I just don't want to see a little bit more. But I agree. Like from what we saw, he's gonna bounce back, I think, and have a really nice year overall. I'm definitely, I was definitely came away much more optimistic on him after what we saw at the in the Arizona Fall League and how he handled the competition there.
Yeah. Anybody else that jumps out to you?
Rojas was like the prime example for me. I had Brady House in that conversation as well, though I do have a little bit of just like concern of whether he's gonna be able to manage the approach enough. But I still think this is a guy that's gonna put together a solid year overall and bounce back. But on terms of the anyone that jumps out to me, I don't know if there's a very obvious answer other than those guys. But I look at injury guys. Like, of course, you could go with a Horton, but those guys aren't really
Right.
underrated.
The
Is there?
the only
I
yeah,
was say, is there anyone else on the mound for you or?
there was only one other name like. And it was so weird because it was a year after Vaughn Grissom, but AJ Smith-Shawver, like Smith-Shawver had a 4.8 in AAA. I think AJ's very good. And I like the numbers against him, like batting average against, I think was right around 210. And he was still striking dudes out. Like he just had these weird blow ups that didn't make any sense to me. He was so young. Like he got up at 20 years old in 2023. So I do think that AJ Smith-Shawver carves out a role in some form or fashion with Atlanta this year, or they let him go start elsewhere because this whole like, hey, he came up in 23, but he's down in Gwinnett hanging out in 24 and 25. That doesn't make any sense with a pitcher of his caliber.
I agree with that. And also I'm thinking like Jet Williams, like
But Jet was
again
hurt.
banged up. I
Yeah,
keep going to like the hurt route, but like that's most of what I'm looking at. Like I think a Tyler Black is become a little bit underrated as well, just
for
because
sure.
I think he got a little stale in AAA. I don't know if he was as locked in and the numbers were not as good. So then when he got up to the big leagues and he didn't succeed, it was like, oh, well, maybe he's not as good as we thought. This guy's dynamic. I do think he's going to make a bigger impact at the big league level. So I also I like him to make a bounce back.
Cool. And then a couple of fun ones to wrap us up. This one from Cam underscore Nom on Instagram. Favorite minor league team names and which organizations name their affiliates the best? I don't have an answer to the last part because like I don't think there's a I don't think there's a correlation there between organization and funny team names, but I did write down like my favorite funny team names in minor league baseball.
And also, sorry, one more name. I do think Blade Tidwell is going to be better this coming season. The
Okay,
stuff's too
cool,
good. The
cool.
execution wasn't there. He was really struggled when he got to AAA, but the guy's too good. Like the
Yeah,
stuff is too good. I think he's going to put together a really strong year at the AAA level. Okay, now
I like it.
names.
Who you like?
I mean, Rocket City Trash Pandas has to be
It's great.
top of the list for me. Also just seeing the garbage can and like
Yeah.
that. It's probably a shirt I'm gonna get at some point. I
Yeah.
gotta go Rocket City Trash Pandas. I know this is like your bread and butter though. You're
This
gonna have
is I put together a list, alphabetical order. The Akron Rubber Ducks,
yeah, it's a good one.
the Amarillo Sod Poodles,
They're number two for me.
the Beloit Sky Carp, the Augusta Green Jackets. I think is awesome being in Augusta, Georgia.
I
It's a
never,
play.
you know what? I never put that together.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty dumb that I never put that together.
I think that's a great one.
That is a really good one. That might be one of the best just in terms of like capitalizing on the regional aspect,
I think
local
so.
aspect.
Um, The Biloxi Shuckers, I think, is a great one
Great one.
with the oyster like mascot. That's great. The Binghamton Rumble Ponies is sick. I really also like the Fort Myers Mighty Muscles, low A for the Twins.
You like the Mighty Muscles.
And then you've got the Hartford Yard Goats is a great one. The Montgomery Biscuits, and then I think aside from the Trash Pandas, my other favorite is the Sugarland Space Cowboys.
Space Cowboy. Yeah, that one is crazy. That's just like Mad Libs throwing a name together there, I feel like.
I think it's a play on astronaut, and I understand it because they're in the Houston area, like NASA headquarters. I think Space Cowboy is a nickname for an astronaut.
Okay. That makes sense then. I'm here for that. I like
Yeah,
that one. Biloxi Shuckers, I think it's just a good
it's good.
quality name.
It's
Quality
good.
name. I Trash Panda's probably got to be the favorite for me because of the logo. The logo goes a long way too.
Yeah,
But I assume a Trash Panda is just a what's it called?
it's
It's
a
just
raccoon.
a raccoon. Yeah.
A
What a
raccoon is just yeah.
what a crazy like mascot decision. Like who goes with a raccoon?
But like, is it wrong?
No, I think it's great. I
Yeah.
love it. I
It,
love it.
I have no idea why they did it, but you know what? They did it. And then last question, on the heels of the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, getting ready for the college football playoff national title game. In the last year, we've seen Monte Harrison, Arkansas wide receiver, and Bubba Thompson. That just broke yesterday, playing quarterback, I think it's South Alabama.
He's walking on for QB.
I think so. He was an all-state quarterback in high school, and I think
Wow.
Bubba Thompson is going to be a walk-on quarterback at South Alabama. In the last year, we've seen Monte Harrison and Bubba Thompson commit to play college football. 5 years from now, if baseball doesn't work out, which prospects would you want to see join your favorite college football team? This comes from, I don't want to say it on X. It's a it's a funny username, but I'm
It's a
not going to say it
username
right now.
that from Jazz Chisholm and what he said responded to somebody on Twitter. That's the origin story of that. So, blank
There
your
you go.
mama.
If you're curious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
if you're curious, you can go do that. But before we get into guys that are currently in minor league baseball, I did want to share a fascinating story right now. Have you heard the name Bryce Betcher?
Sounds familiar.
Astros draft pick last year. I think he was
Okay.
14th, 15th round. This is from Brian McTaggart on January 8th. Astros draft pick Bryce Betcher informed the team that he intends to play football next season at Oregon and he will not be reporting to spring training in 2025. He was given the opportunity of reporting to the Astros in 25 and then returning to Oregon in time for the start of the 25 college football season, but has decided to focus on preparing for the upcoming college football season. Betcher also relayed that he intends to reevaluate his options following the football season. Those options include reporting to spring training in 2026. Bryce Betcher was one of the leading tacklers and one of the starting linebackers for Oregon this year, the number one team in the country. But he also put up, I think, an OPS in the high 800s for Oregon baseball, and the Astros took him in the later rounds. So they own the rights to
Hmm.
Bryce Betcher, but Betcher, if he balls out in his senior season at Oregon, could end up declaring for the NFL draft and doing a subdued Kyler Murray thing, which I found
Wow.
fascinating.
I love that stuff, man. It's just so much fun to me. I love keeping up with that as much. And Jerry and Ely was a big one. I remember he ended up
Yep.
sticking the football route. I don't know. I think he got practice squad, maybe put a little bit for the Chiefs, but I always love keeping up with those guys and seeing what happens. That's a cool one to monitor.
For sure. But now we get to the guys that are playing baseball right now. Who do you want?
Well, and to be clear, has nothing to do with whether we think they're going to succeed in baseball or not. This is just
No.
how we think they would translate to the football field. Bubba Thompson, by the way, 3-star QB.
Okay.
I think he was expected to like commit to Troy for football. He took a visit there and everything. He had offers from Memphis, Ole Miss, UCF, Western Kentucky. I think among a few others. Remember, it's for your favorite college football team. I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan before Syracuse, and I can't watch that defense anymore. That secondary is brutal. Give me Robbie Snelling playing linebacker, safety, hybrid, whatever. Someone who knows the X's and O's can put him in a better position than I would know. But I know that is probably in terms of most highly regarded football playing baseball player currently in the minor leagues. I don't know if there's a more highly regarded football player prospect currently. You have Bubba Chandler, but I
Yeah.
think from a scouting perspective, if we want to put weight into stars and all that good stuff, I think Robbie Snelling is the highest rated of the group. Give me him at linebacker for the Hurricanes, please.
Okay, so I had Robbie Snelling written down, and I'll walk you through his offers. I'm going to pull up Bubba's football offers here on 247 if they are available. Let's see. If you can find
No,
his
Bubba was a better
offers.
prospect. I'm looking at it now.
Bubba was a 4-star. Yeah, Bubba
They
was a
both were 4
4-star.
stars, but Bubba Chandler was yeah, I mean, he was the number 200 player in the class, number 20 QB, whereas
Oh,
Robbie Snelling was ranked the 311th player in the class, 42nd linebacker, but still, holy crap, studs.
yeah, I've got his offers now. We've got some dogs in minor league baseball, man.
Oh yeah.
Like, wow. By the way, Alec Thomas was going to play wide receiver and play baseball at TCU. I just wanted to
Yeah.
give him a shout as well. Like, that was a crazy dual sport athlete. But yeah, Robbie Snelling at linebacker was one of my shouts, and then Bubba Chandler at quarterback was another one of my shouts. The offers for Snelling, you ready for this? Um, he was apparently going to go to LSU to play linebacker, but offers from Wazoo, Vandy, Utah, UNLV, Tulane, Texas, Stanford, San Diego State, Penn State, Oregon, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Michigan, Cal, Boise, Auburn, Arizona State, Arizona, UCLA, Nebraska, LSU. That's a crazy offer list. And then Bubba's offered list: UNC Wilmington, Gardner Webb, Western Kentucky, Elon, Mercer, Charlotte, Clemson, Louisville, Miami, Ole Miss. And he was committed to play at Clemson.
That's pretty wild. I
Damn.
Yeah, those are two studs. I also Lonnie White.
Oh, yeah.
Give me Lonnie
Oh,
White
yeah.
at wideout.
Oh, yeah.
4 star, 74th overall in the country, according to 247. His offers, he's a Northeast guy, so I don't think he's gonna have as ridiculous of like the offer list, but he was I think ready to go to Penn State, play receiver for Penn State. So pretty darn good there. He had offers from like Georgia Tech, Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Syracuse, on and on and on. But and then I think that the best answer, he still counts, even though he's a big leaguer. It's Jordan
Yeah.
Adams.
Yeah. I was actually just about to say Jordan Adams, and I pulled up his offer list on 247. He's committed to play at Carolina, but the offers are nuts.
He's a 5 star.
Bama, I have 4-star on
So
24/7.
247 had him at 5, and then I think the composite had him at 4. I don't know how all that works,
Damn.
but
But he was committed to Carolina to play both. His offers: Bama, Clemson, ECU, Indiana, Kentucky, LSU, Maryland, Mississippi State, Ohio State, Ole Miss, SMU, South Carolina, Southern Miss, TCU, Vatech. Wow.
even funnier thing to wrap up here. My favorite thing with Jordan Adams is the receivers that he was ranked between. So I don't know who Justin Shorter is. He was ranked the number 1 receiver in the country that year.
Yeah.
Played at Penn State. Number 2 receiver in the country was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Number 3 receiver in the country was Jordan Adams. Number 4 receiver in the country was Jamar Chase.
Dude.
It's pretty nuts. Pretty
That's
nuts. So he
crazy.
might be the next guy to do it. If he's going to get another big league shot here with the Orioles, and could potentially be a bench guy for them, and hopefully it works out there. But I mean, I'm sure teams will be very happy to give him a shot on the gridiron as well, if he wants to go that route.
100%. I'm looking at where Bubba was stacked up. Bubba was 7 spots ahead of Shador Sanders in the 24/7 quarterback rankings. He was right behind Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. I forgot how good Miller Moss was supposed to be. Like, damn. Yeah, there are a lot of guys like that. But
That's a fun question.
fascinating.
Thank you for
Fascinating.
that one. I love that. That was a great question. But that'll do it for this episode for the mailbag here. We're talking to Peyton Eels later this week. One of the coolest stories, and I think minor league baseball right now in the Twins organization. And we will have a Pirates update on the top prospect list coming soon as well. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to start churning those out again quite quickly now that we're on the other side of the holiday. As always, thank you for listening. If you leave a rating, help us grow the show. That would be awesome. Also, look out for our friends on the clock. We got a new show.
Hmm.
Draft interviews. Jay Johnson, also talking
Yeah.
to some of the best college coaches in the sport as well. And then draft rankings are going to be on justbaseball.com with our guys, Tyler Jennings and Jared Perkins. So very much looking forward to that and with the wrinkles that that's going to add to just baseball. So keep an eye out there. As always, thank you for listening. We'll talk prospects with you later this week.